welcome to the second episode of the Becoming Women podcast with me, your host, Ella Sims, where each episode I speak with inspiring women about their teenage years. If this is your first time listening, a very warm welcome to you, and if you're a regular listener, then thank you. My mission with this podcast is to support teenage girls as they navigate the ups and downs of growing up. In each episode, I talk with grown women about their individual journeys as a teenager, the highs and lows, any challenges they may have faced, and what advice they would share with their younger self, to help reassure you that you are not alone and those tricky teenage years will pass. On today's episode, I am with Emma Thomson. Emma is a leadership development and career coach. She studied history at Aberdeen University before moving to London to join Accenture as a management consultant graduate. She spent 8 fun-filled years there before moving to BT. After 2 maternity leaves, Emma decided she wanted more flexibility and decided to start her own business as an executive coach, where she works one-to-one with individuals and organisations to help people with their career and personal development goals. A particular passion of hers is working with women and helping them to find a fulfilling career that allows them to balance the demands of parenthood whilst also doing something they enjoy and get energy from. Emma lives in London with her husband and 2 sons. Hi Emma, it's really good to see you again so soon.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you again.
I know, just for those who are listening, we met earlier this year because you're a careers coach.
That's right.
And I actually wouldn't be sat here doing this with you if it wasn't for you. So thank you for that. And I think what would be really nice today for me especially is that we've talked already before and it's been a lot about me and myself and figuring things out.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about you.
Okay.
So I know you've got a little bit of an accent. So
Yes.
You grew up in Scotland.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was born in Glasgow and lived in Glasgow for the first 10 years of my life, and then moved out into the country in central Scotland. And, I lived there until I was 18 and moved away to university. So
Okay. So you had all of your school years in Scotland.
that's right. Yeah.
And what was that like?
It was. I mean, it was great. It was. Scotland's very different from living in London. I mean, I've lived in London now for 20 odd years, and it's a kind of much smaller environment. The main challenge for me was actually when we moved, because we moved just as I was changing school.
Okay.
And I ended up travelling back into Glasgow, which was about a 20-mile round trip to go to school in senior school.
Oh wow, okay.
So that was kind of interesting because all my friends were sort of in Glasgow and then I was out in the country.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting dynamic as a teenager.
Yeah, so were you dependent on your parents to sort of ferry you to and from things?
Yeah, mostly.
Yeah.
I think it was one of the most exciting milestones in my life when I learned how to drive.
I feel like that's the same for a lot of teenagers. Yeah. I was quite late, but I think especially when you live on the outskirts of somewhere and you want to be in on things with your friends, that you need that freedom.
That's right, yeah.
And did you have good friendships with people? Or?
Yeah, I did have good friendships. I mean, I'm an only child, and I think that sometimes brings its challenges in terms of how you interact and are comfortable in groups of kids, because you're not used to, I guess at home it was quite an adult environment, really, because you're hanging out with your mum and dad all the time and kind of your mum and dad's friends, and we don't have a particularly large family anyway. My mum's an only child and she's from her family's from Somerset, and my dad's family were from Wales. So I didn't grow up with a lot of other children around, so it was I found school a little bit challenging from that perspective. I mean, I had, great friends. Yeah. But I'd say that was probably the thing that I found most difficult about being at school.
That's interesting. What would you, I guess, if someone's listening now and they kind of feel the same, what would you advise to them? Did you find there were particular things that worked for you?
I think it was just really guess I just had to work a bit harder to find common ground with people. And I think I was more comfortable in sort of, I didn't have lots of friends. I had one or two good friends.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably just accepting the fact that that's
just the way
that's
it is.
The way it is.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to fight against something that doesn't come naturally.
That makes sense. And did you have any challenges or struggles with studying?
So at school, not particularly. Well, I was much more, as is quite often the case with girls and women, I think I was kind of more naturally interested in English and languages, the arts. So they came more naturally to me. I did find, and I still to this day really struggle with maths. And a lot of that I think actually was not any kind of natural ability, but just pretty bad teachers that kind of scared me to death. And I really, really struggled with it, and that's kind of had a lifelong impact on me in terms of just not being confident with numbers at all.
It's interesting how there's a subject that you don't naturally gel with anyway, and then if you do have a teacher that doesn't help bring something out of you with it, that it sort of continues. I was the same. Maths was bad. I know. So it's I think everyone has subjects, strength, things that they're strong at and things they're not so strong at. But I don't at school I find it was fairly straightforward. Is there anything that you did at school that you feel led to what you do now as a leadership and career coach?
I think it's interesting because even though what I was talking about in terms of my challenge with large groups and friendships, I think I've always been very interested in people and how people interact. And I did, the one thing that I did in senior school that I really enjoyed for the school was debating and kind of working with people and having interacts that I really, really loved. So I think that's probably was a start of a natural leaning towards things with people. But I didn't, my studies didn't particularly take me in that direction for a while. You might think that, one would study psychology or something at uni, which I didn't do.
And what I'd be really interested to hear you talk about a little bit is if you've worked with any young girls or women who are contemplating what they want to do, what sort of advice or skills you would get them to consider?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that even though from an education perspective I found school very straightforward, when I left school I didn't find university so straightforward and the first couple of years of work. So I decided that I wanted to study law and become a lawyer. But I started the first year of law at university and absolutely hated it and ended up failing the year.
Interesting. Okay.
Which was really, really hard.
Yeah.
A huge life lesson. Having kind of got through school reasonably successfully and kind of achieved the grades basically that I wanted to kind of be hit with that in the first year at uni was quite difficult to cope with. And I kind of I was given a choice of either to resit the exams and pass the first year and then transition into another subject for second year, or just to go back and start first year again, which is the option that I took. I studied history. And then after I graduated from university, I took a graduate job in London, which I absolutely hated and only lasted 6 months at. So I think probably the advice, because I do mentor girls at university, and the advice that I always give people is there's really no such thing as a bad choice or a bad decision. You may make a decision that you wish that you hadn't with hindsight, but actually the things that you learn from the things that maybe don't go as well will actually be the most valuable life lessons. Yeah, definitely. So I think it's very easy to get quite bogged down in the decisions that you make quite early on in your life are going to be the be all and end all and are going to set course for the rest of your life, but actually that's not the case at all. And I think what's actually more important is to go with what you're interested in, you know, potentially where your passions lie, or at least where you feel confident and happy in terms of the decisions you make about what course you do or what job you go for after you study. If university studies what you do after school, and you know, go with something that you're going to have energy and enthusiasm for. And if you realise that it's not working, there's no shame in saying, do you know what, actually I'm going to do something different.
Yeah, and to start again, or to make a change.
Exactly. And I think the other thing is, you know, even in my 40 odd years of life, you know, the world of work is changing so quickly. There's no such thing as a career for life now. People don't tend to stay in the same company for, you know, 40, 50 years. Yeah. People will naturally move around, change careers, change the roles that they do, change the organisations they work for. So it's really just, for me, more about, as I say, doing things that give you energy and passion. And also remember that generally people work for people, they don't work for organisations. So the links that you make with people, if you get on well with your boss, or if you make good connections with the people around you, that will serve you in really good stead. Because generally, you know, when people move around, they tend to then want to take the people that they've enjoyed working with them, and it creates new opportunities. So I say those are the things that are actually really important when you're thinking about work.
I guess if someone's really struggling with that, are there particular resources or maybe even books that they could look at to help them with those decisions?
I am a huge believer actually in just what you find on the internet and searching. I always say, you know, a lot of people that I mentor, it's very popular at the moment to, you know, if you're going through university, to want to go for the big graduate jobs, you know, the management, joining the management consultancy type things, the big four. And I'm a big believer in get as much practical information as possible. So go onto the websites, understand what these things actually involve, what the job would actually be like and entail. Just gather as much practical information as you can, I think, is the most useful tool. But I mean, there are loads of books now. Everyone seems to be writing books around, you know, careers and also how you can be successful as a woman in your chosen career path. You know, books like The Step Up Club, the multi-hyphen career by McGannon, all these types of things are all really useful information in terms of setting your mindset, widening your mindset a bit in terms of actually what a career looks like these days. Yeah,
that's great. I also wanted to ask as well, you may see quite a lot of CVs from people that you work with.
Yeah.
And that may give you kind of a good idea of what makes a good CV. What do you think is important to have on there?
So I think the thing to remember is that generally a CV will also be accompanied by a covering letter, and I think the CV is the place to really showcase what your education is, but more importantly, what skills and experience you've gained through your educational experience and any projects you might have done or any practical experience, work experience that you've done whilst you've been studying, or if you're not at university, just in terms of you know, what you actually deliver when you're working. Because I think what people are looking for is almost the experience. The job part of the CV is a given. What people are really looking for is that what extra are you going to bring? So you know, are you a self-starter? Can you work independently? Do you have good initiative? Do you understand what it means to actually produce results? So I think it's really important to be able to bring in as much of what you've actually done and what that might have produced as possible, rather than just giving a list of, you know, what your role was and what the responsibilities were within it, for example. You want to be, you know, I worked, I was a shop assistant at the weekend. I was responsible for stock checking and, till training, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But actually, I also saw that this process wasn't working really well, so I suggested I did something else, and that really helped. That's the stuff that's actually really important. And also bringing in, you've got an opportunity in the profile at the top of your CV to really bring in a bit of your personality. So, what makes you you? Why are you why are you interested in this particular job, and what uniquely do you bring to it?
Mm-hmm. I think also, I know something that I've struggled with in the past is selling yourself, or asking even for a pay rise. Do you have any experience of that?
I think it's something particularly, not wanting to be sexist, but it is something inherently that women find quite difficult, because actually what we tend to value are actually what we bring as a person, and how we help to deliver things in terms of who we actually are. But I think in having conversations like asking for a pay rise, or selling yourself for a different role, or any kind of career progression, I think it's really important to, much like you would, if you were going into a sales pitch at work, think about sales pitching yourself. So a little bit like your CV, do some preparation beforehand in terms of what uniquely do you bring to work, what is it that you have delivered that the organisation should value, and really, therefore, why is it that you think, and be very clear about what it is that you're looking for. Don't pussyfoot around expecting someone to pick up on, right, that means that Emma wants 10 grand more this year. You need to actually directly ask for what it is that you're looking for. And I think, remember that all they can say is, the worst thing that's going to happen is they say no, or we can't give you that much, or well, not this year, but if you can show that you can do X, Y, and Z over the course of the next few months, let's talk again in 6 months or a year's time.
Because especially, no means no on that occasion, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't come back in 6 months' time, a year's time, and try and have that same conversation again.
No, exactly. Exactly. But I think, I think you've got to remember that, you know what it's like yourself, Ella. We all do. Everyone has got so much going on. We live in a world of busyness the whole time, and we've got devices going off everywhere, and everyone wants things delivered immediately now. There's no let up. People aren't necessarily thinking, I've got a meeting with Ella today, and she's going to ask for this. People aren't in that mindset. They're not expecting. So the onus is on you to be very crystal clear about what it is you're looking for and why, and be confident about it. And the other thing that I would say is, it's a bit different for me now because I work for myself, so it's the type of conversation that I'm doing is going to a new client to pitch for work or whatever. But I actually, what I do is on the way in, I sort of record myself. I practice a few times saying what it is that I'm going to say, so that by the time I actually get into the meeting, I'm not, even though it doesn't come naturally to me to talk about money, but by that point, I've said it out loud a number of times,
and you've already rehearsed it.
Exactly. That by that point, even though you can feel you're starting to get nervous and a bit sweaty, it's there because you've already said it a few times, you've rehearsed it, and it will naturally, it'll come out more naturally and confidently.
That's great advice, thank you. You mentioned the word devices. I would love to speak to you about, I know you've got two boys. And so you're parents. How do you feel about, I guess there's just so many distractions with social media, phones, technology everywhere. I just really want to hear about sort of what you think and feel about it.
It's a real, so I haven't got, my boys are 7 and 9, so the only, from a next generation perspective, the only issue, the only contact I've really had with the boys is YouTube and wanting to play games socially where you interact with other people on PlayStations and things. And I think the thing that I find most difficult to get my head around with the whole thing is the fact that I think because social media is in this world where you're actually removed from being in the same room as someone face to face, I think the behaviour that produces and the boundaries that are almost taken away because people can say or do things that they would never have the courage to say face to face. The sort of real horrible negative stuff that you see. That's the thing that I find most difficult, and it's not even, I mean, I see things on social media accounts that I follow, and where it's not even a thing that's restricted to sort of teenagers or people in younger than me. You see this kind of behaviour in people of their 40s and 50s as well, where they think it's acceptable to be able to say these things. So I think the challenge for children and teenagers growing up now is to find the resilience that when you know that something's not okay, to work out how you deal with it, whether you tackle it head on or whether you just decide it's better to walk away, ignore what's going on, but be able to talk openly about what you're experiencing. Much like, because it's very easy to internalise these things. Just like, I mean, I was bullied at school.
Right,
and,
okay.
It's easy to, it feels a bit shaming to say to anyone this is happening. It's not a nice thing, and you feel like you've not done something wrong. But I think it's understanding that that's not actually the case. I think that's the biggest thing to tackle, because I think that and the whole issue of comparison, body image, how people portray themselves, that really isn't reality. Again, I think it's understanding the difference between what people portray and what the reality is, and what's important to you yourself in terms of your values and what you know to be right and wrong.
Yeah. Just picking up on you mentioning saying that you were bullied at school. What was that like, if you don't mind me asking you? And
so I was quite I was pretty young. I mean, I think I was probably 7 or 8.
Okay.
And it was very much in those days, it was kind of on the bus on the way home from school. Give me your money, whatever pocket money you've got for sweets or whatever. And it didn't, it felt, because I think at that point, because I was quite often on my own, going back to what I was saying around, not really being that comfortable surrounding myself with lots of kids. I think that the person that was doing it picked up on that.
Okay, yeah.
And saw an easy target.
Yeah. So mean.
It's really mean, I think I rationalised it pretty quickly in terms of, this person is just not a nice person.
Yeah.
And, I remember talking it through with my mum.
Okay, so you went and decided to speak to someone about it.
I did, yeah. I think she could see that I was upset getting off the bus and stuff. And I think just worked out a way to rationalise it. Kind of almost what I was saying before with the social media stuff. It's recognising what your values are and what you know to be right and wrong. Just finding a strategy to let it wash over you and ignore it as best you can, because it's not worth the energy. These people aren't worth the energy. No,
and sort of rising above it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's easy, there are cases where this bullying situation is a lot worse than that, and it's not so easy to let it wash over you, but I think that's, for me, that's always the first port of call.
So to lighten the mood a little
Yes.
bit, I was going to ask a series of silly-ish questions. Can you tell me a teen crush that you had?
A teen crush? It's got to be Tom Cruise. I was just...
in awe.
In awe of Tom Cruise. Yes. What can I say? Tom Cruise in Top Gun or whatever it was in Cocktail was just it for me.
And when was your first kiss? How old were you?
I was probably... I'm trying to think. I guess I was about 12, 13, I don't know. It was, I went to, my secondary school was an all-girls school. And there was a boy at the school next door called, I think he was called Kenny, and I thought he was very cool, kind of skater dude.
Oh, yes.
And I think he was my first kiss. And then I think I was madly in love for about 2 weeks, and then realised that Kenny was not going to be the one for me long term.
And it fizzled out.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Brilliant. And I wanted to also ask, what bands did you like? I like knowing what CD or tape someone went out and got for the first time.
So I remember the first album that was bought for me was, and I'm really showing my age now, Aha.
Oh, love Aha.
Yeah, so I think that was, in terms of remembering the first kind of physical record, it was a proper old LP that I was given. It was Aha. And I really liked Aha. I was a big fan of Wet, Wet, Wet. Being a good Glaswegian girl, because they were from Glasgow. But what I do remember, I think one of my earliest recollections of music was my mum and dad must have bought an album of The Police.
Okay,
and I remember it being played in the car a lot, and I think that's probably one of my first musical recollections.
I also wanted to ask about when you got your period as well.
Okay. Do you know, it's really interesting. I was talking about this the other day because my son had just come back recently from his first sort of school camp away.
Oh, right, okay.
And I was talking about this to someone, and we were recollecting our first experiences, and actually I got my period on my first school camp. I was quite young, I was 10.
Oh, okay.
10, almost 11, I think.
Okay, that is quite young.
It was quite traumatic, and my mum had to come and pick me up from this school camp.
So the school told your mum?
I think so. I'm trying to remember. I think I kind of sort of almost put it right to the back of my mind, apart from, I think that must have been what happened, is school must have called and said, I think you need to come and get Emma because this has happened. But at the time it was it was kind of a traumatic thing to happen, because I guess I wasn't really expecting it.
No.
I don't think, because it was quite young, I'm not sure there'd really been much chat about it either, at home or at school, because I was just a bit ahead of the curve. So
it was a bit of shock.
It was a bit of shock.
And how was that, I guess, if you are younger and it's before you've joined secondary school as well, how did you find that in terms of, I don't know, I feel like when you always feel a bit weird if you're the girl who's late or later and then you're missing out on something.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I guess as soon as you said that, I just couldn't relate to it, because it's kind of, I think it's one of these things where it's almost, once it's happened for the first time and that's it, and then it just becomes a part of life, doesn't it? It's, and I remember my mum got me a book about it, so I could kind of read about what it was all about and what to expect. And I think, because it happens every month, you just need to get your head around it, don't you, and get on with it. And then it's kind of I think also from what I can remember, it wasn't really something that we particularly talked about openly, or I talked about openly, particularly at school. I wasn't really very aware of it really being a very open thing.
Yeah, I feel like now it's very different. I feel not necessarily my generation, but if you're a teenager now or a little bit older, or you're in your early 20s, people don't seem to mind to sort of share that type of information as much, which I think is great.
Well, I think all these things are really important. I think it's really important to be able to talk openly about, that stuff, period starting, period generally. It's also so important to talk about having regular smear tests, which, I know is a real reluctance, in young women these days to have them, and it's so important in many ways, because it's something that only we experience, and when and if you're thinking about having children, all that sort of stuff becomes quite relevant. And then again, when you go beyond that stuff and start to get a bit older, it's how you cope with those things as well. So I think it's really important. It's totally important to be as open as possible about it. Did you have, I guess, uncomfortable periods or anything painful? Yeah, I did. So I went through a real phase where they were super, super, super heavy, like ridiculously heavy. Would sort of couldn't go into school heavy, and were causing me to be a bit anemic and stuff. And then they just seemed to sort of calm down eventually. I mean, I have had ongoing issues with these things, which you realise when you start wanting to have a family. But yeah, and it was really difficult, because it is when you're bleeding a lot and very heavily. That can be quite a difficult thing to cope with, because actually it makes you feel, physically it makes you feel rubbish, and emotionally it makes you feel rubbish as well, because it's uncomfortable and you're crampy, and you just want to get on with life, and it's then really tricky. If you're not at school, it impacts, I guess, your studies or your homework, or you're missing out on things as well, which is really tricky. Yeah, but I think I think everyone has challenges with their cycle at some point or another. Yeah. You're very lucky if you don't. If it's all smooth. Yeah.
Great. And I also wanted to ask, just sort of rounding up, thinking back over the experiences that you had and where you are now, what you would advise your younger self?
I think that no decision is a bad decision. And just relax and be yourself. Yeah. It's very, very easy to get caught in a web of what you think you should be doing and how you think you should be and how other people are expecting you to be. And I think finding a way to be comfortable in your own skin is the most valuable thing to get your head around.
I couldn't agree more with that. And I've been asking all of my guests, if you could gift teenage girls everywhere anything, what would that be?
I think it would be the gift of open friendship, non-judgmental friendship. So everyone having someone that they can talk to and share things with completely openly and without judgment.
That is actually a really good one. I really like that. Well, thank you so much, Emma. It's been brilliant speaking to you today. Thanks for listening to Becoming Women with me, Ella Sims. If you like the show and want to know more, head to becomingwomen.com or follow me on Twitter or Instagram. I'd love it if you could rate and review this podcast or get in touch, as your comments on each episode mean so much to me.